What is it with Bahamians and free shit? What am I saying? Everyone loves free stuff, right? Free drinks at the bar, free tickets to that concert you wanted to go to, and government guaranteed pensions. Oh yeah, that falls into the category of free shit. Stuff that you didn't have to do anything to get, other than be born here. And don't give me that whole, well, I pay an international insurance now, so that's my money I get. No, it's not. When you retire, it's not your money, someone else's money. You see, the money you're paying into these systems now are going to pay people who are benefiting from these systems. The systems that you're going to benefit from in 5, 10, 15 years, well, when you retire, someone else is going to be paying into that. That's where your money is going to be coming from. It's free shit. You didn't do anything to deserve it. None of us did. But for some reason, we all feel it's our God-given right to continually suck at the teat of government for as long as we breathe. It's not right. It's not right, and it's going to bankrupt us sooner or later. I recently sat down with Terneille Burrows, former candidate for the constituency of Elizabeth. We talked about a few things like Marco's Law and some other government issues. It was really interesting. Take a look. I'm sitting here with Terneille Burrows. Is it Terneille? Terneille? How do you prefer it being pronounced?
It's Terneille.
Terneille.
That's how it's spelled.
Right.
And that's how it is.
That's why I pronounce it that way, but I've never heard anyone actually pronounce your name Terneille.
Well, we Bahamians.
True.
We don't pronounce R's.
Okay.
We add R's at the end of words that they don't belong on to sound proper, like Mona Lisa. But we don't pronounce R's that should be pronounced.
I love my people.
Me too.
Now, most people watching this probably don't know, but this is not the first time I've interviewed you. It's not even the second time I've interviewed you. Now, let's show our age just a little bit, and I see you looking at me skeptically. The last time we interviewed each other, do you remember? Well, I interviewed you. You didn't interview me.
No.
No. It was at the CD release party, where I believe what was your last studio album. I could be corrected on that.
It was probably for an album in 2009 that I released.
Yeah.
2008. Yeah.
There you go.
Cool.
Yes.
A decade ago.
Yes, and we only got to speak for about 45 seconds before you were called on to stage to do your set.
And you still have this footage?
So most people probably don't know you from your performance days.
Au contraire.
Really?
Yeah.
Now we're talking young people now, your base.
Well,
Do they know you as Tada?
no, I would say people, my age is 38, so I would say people 25 and older know me as Tada.
Right.
So under 25 don't know what a Tada is.
Okay. How would those under 25s know you today?
If they know me at all, they would know me as an activist, an advocate primarily for child protection and rights and anti-corruption reform. And some would know me as a candidate for the last general election.
Well, since you brought it up, let's talk about it.
You just threw me a
Did I?
lob and I took it.
I had no idea that's where we were going. Where do you stand politically? And I mean in the most general of terms. Do you consider yourself more on the socialism side, more capitalist, free market economy, more, dare I say, communist in general? What's your political ideology? What's your beliefs?
Well, I used to say that I'm not into politics. Then when
Until
I
you got
realized,
into politics.
until I got into activism,
Okay.
which led me to get into politics because a lot of political and governmental decisions affect the rights and privileges that we have as citizens. So everyone in one way or another is affected by politics.
See, when I say that, people don't believe me.
Well, it depends on the delivery. Maybe
I probably say it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of labeling myself politically, I don't do that. But I think my views are more towards liberal generally. I believe that everyone, every man, woman, boy, girl, regardless of their race, religion, background, or anything, should have appropriate rights and privileges. There should be equity under the law. I believe in justice. And so anything along those lines, politically, I would say would make up my ideology.
Why independent?
Why independent? Why not?
Well, okay,
Childless.
let me give you the argument from the over 60 Bahamian as to why not be independent. Gal, it's only two parties we could get anything done. You either with the gold or you with the red. And if you ain't with one of them, first of all, you ain't getting no seat, and secondly, you don't have no say.
That
I
was-
think that's it in a nutshell.
That was well done.
Thank you.
You get an award for that. I
Thank
don't
you.
know.
I appreciate that.
The dancer or something.
Huh?
They still exist.
Okay.
I guess first of all, I'm not as concerned about what the 60 plus constituent might feel about their political or what my political preferences should be.
Let's pause there for a second because I don't want anyone to think that you are in any way downgrading or, how do I say this now? I don't want anyone to think you're insulting the over 60 crew because
Yeah,
I know that's not what
I'm
you're
not an
doing.
ageist at all. I believe
Right.
that young people and elderly people should have rights and access and opportunities. But what I'm saying is, in terms of perspective, younger people are going to inherit this country and be living here and be stewards of it for a longer period of time. So their perspectives are more pertinent in the long run than someone who's elderly and may have had influences that I can't relate to. I wasn't born when majority rule came about. So the Bahamas that I knew and the Bahamas that I envision is based on something past that point. So where you might be using majority rule as an old 60-year-old man as a benchmark, I'm using after the 1992 election where the FNM came to power. And actually my story as a child was my parents are not politically affiliated. They vote for whomever they want, regardless of color. They probably base their vote on the candidate themselves. This is how I was raised. I went home one day and said, Mommy, Daddy, so he's FNM or PLP? And they were like,
Because that's how you spoke back then. You either were one or the other.
but they said, no, we're not, we're neither. But my mom's family is historically PLP and my dad's family is historically FNM. So I had, I guess, a unique upbringing in that sense. So when it comes to parties, I go based on my personal perception of growing up as a child, knowing that Sir Lyndon Pindling was like the hero of the nation, then realizing that there was some commission of inquiry at some point where everybody just answered, I do not recall, and that broke down my perception of whatever they were at the time. Then in 1992, when I was 12 years old and the FNM won the general election for the first time, I asked my parents, what does this mean? Is this going to change the country in some great way? What does this mean? And they said, well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. So I spent the next term until I was 18 kind of waiting to see if some major thing happened. And I never saw any major thing happen in my little childish mind. So I said to myself, I will never vote FNM or PLP because I never thought that any of them were progressive enough from my perspective. Then when I was 32 in
But
2012.
I'm sure you will also admit before you go on that
Yeah.
they did accomplish some things.
Yeah, but I'm
You
just
know,
saying.
the government in the sunshine wasn't just for show, right?
No, I think on the onset, the 67 election brought in the PLP government. They did a number of things initially to get the ball rolling.
Indeed.
Then at a certain point, they got complacent. They might have gotten complicit in certain areas. And
Some may use some other C words.
right,
Yeah.
CO.
Yeah.
And then it just that was it. That was their time is done. Time to go. Never to be seen again. Hopefully, in my opinion. Then the FNM came. We are the sunshine government. We gonna deliver. We gonna do this. We gonna do that. They for a time opened the airwaves. Did some things like if you could really look at the things that we point to historically. The PLP introduced national insurance, and I think they did some things with the public school system and integration and things like that. Awesome. And then the FNM opened up the airways and other things. But at the point of 2012, when I voted for the first time, because I said if I would never vote PLP or FNM, I just had no one to vote for, essentially. I based it on my constituency and who was the best representative based on what I saw them doing. And that was the existing member of parliament at the time, Leslie Miller. in tall pants.
Okay.
I was 32, voted for the first time. So when he said what he did about beating a woman in parliament and later was labeled a joke, I personally had a problem with that. This is what also helped me to look at politics a bit more closely. I give my one vote what I hold out all these years for. And then my member of parliament, who I helped to get elected, gone in there and talked that kind of dangerous foolishness. I was like, who are these people? What are they doing? What are we allowing? So that was a bit of an impetus towards actually running and saying, I will provide an alternative to the FNM and PLP, regardless of whether you take me seriously, regardless of whether you think I'm old enough or not, because that was the big thing I got on the trail.
You will not be able to say later on that we had no other option.
Yeah. But a lot of people wondered if me being a woman or other issues affected when I went around door to door. The first thing they asked me after they hear me talk, they say, oh, I think you're making a lot of sense, you know, but how old are you anyway? And I just would be like, how old are you? I mean, like, how is this relevant again?
Either what I'm saying makes sense or it doesn't. Why does my age have to come into... I'm old enough to run.
I should have known. So when I told them I was 37 at the time, they're like, oh, okay. Because I thought you were like 26 and, you know.
Now,
And
that's
that would have been a
interesting.
problem if I was 26. Because I believe older people don't
Would have
think
been
that
the Doogie Howser
20-something
syndrome.
year olds have lived enough to talk what they want to represent, constituency.
Are there any Bahamians to speak of over the age of 30 who even speak like that, though? Have they heard the things that they heard from you that they said made sense? Have they heard that from someone who wasn't under,
That's
let's
a
say,
good.
the
That's
30?
a good perspective.
I mean, either I'm making sense or I'm not. And if I'm making sense, and you've heard this before, but you've only heard it from people that you discount because of their age, what does that say about you?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I like to trot. I like to straddle this. I'm older in actuality, but not so old that I'm not considered still young and hip. But I'm also connected enough to the young people that I could relate to both. And I honestly feel like that's who I am. Like, I could go to any household in any area, and I've been to all sorts, from royalty to someone living in what we would say is an inner city community. And I'm the same everywhere. So I don't find it difficult to meet people and relate to people because I can relate to a lot of different types of people.
It's interesting that they did some things, but they did not entrench in our legal system a way for that to be perpetuated. I.e., we're going to tell you all the dirty secrets of the people we're replacing, but we're leaving the same template in place so that we can get away with it ourselves. That's how I term it. I'm not. You may be running again, and you don't want to burn any bridges, but I'll put it that way.
We're talking from a current and historical perspective.
Yes, we
If one of
definitely
these
are.
parties gets saved, and they understand the progressive way forward, and I don't mean progressive like PLP progressive, I mean like literally, liberally, like rights and privileges and access and equal opportunity and equity, great. I would consider them. I don't see that happening anytime soon because it would not be advantageous to any of the major political parties at this point. There's a system in place that you alluded to.
Yes, there is.
And
And
there's
that
a
everyone
group.
knows about, but we only talk about it in private.
There's a group, and I will say it publicly. There is us, down here, and then there's the political elite,
Up there.
way up there. And foreign direct investors and the affluent and whomever else you want to lump into that category. But we down here, worshiping them. Meanwhile, we getting stomped all over and lied to and manipulated. And our cost of living is astronomical and in the top handful in the entire world. What are we getting for it? I could see if our cost of living was this high and we were like getting benefits and could drive on roads without killing our cars every day and had some sort of tertiary education that was free for all or some major healthcare institution, then I could see our cost of living being astronomical. But at this point, like, why? What are we getting out of this deal? Do we have people who work in other than in tourism and service industries, and or do we have an economy that's thriving? Because at the end of the day, all this foreign direct investment leaves the country. Not all. Only about 85% of it. So that's the reality we living in the Bahamas. And we call it a good time. Because why? Because we like our colors. And we like our parties. And we like our rum. and we like our demigods.
Two questions. One, why is that a problem?
Why is what a problem?
Everything you just explained, because
I like living good.
keep voting for the same parties over and over, so we obviously don't have as much of a problem with it as you seem to have.
I like living good. I've lived in Canada and other places than the Bahamas. I know what it is to not have to worry and to be able to access services and to be able to call an institution or walk into an institution or go online and get something done. Ease of doing business in this country, horrendous. So you have ease of doing business is horrendous. You have the cost of living is astronomical. And you have the vast majority of money that enters this country leaving. This doesn't benefit us to any large extent. We need to focus more on diversification within tourism industries. We need to focus on more entrepreneurial focused initiatives, building tech industries and all this sort of stuff. We've been doing the same old, or should I say our governments have been doing the same old for so long and been getting away with it for so long that anything that bucks that is a problem. But anything that bucks that is probably progressive and going to be beneficial to the Bahamian public. There are some people that are complicit in the whole operation of political corruption and things like that. But I think the vast majority of us who actually have the power have yet to see the power because we just sit back and say, oh, well, they must see no because there's the leaders. They must see no because there's the government. I beg to differ. It's time for us to start making some sense because we ain't making no sense right now.
Okay. So you've just convinced the electorate that it is a problem. What do we do about it?
It's a multifaceted approach. You have to look at
Top 3 ways we can at least start to change that for the better.
specifically government.
Whatever format you choose to take.
Well, obviously, I believe that we need to cultivate more options that are viable and feasible to present opportunities for independent voices in Parliament. That's a start. So I'm going to say that I think promoting and understanding the importance of independent candidates and those who might actually be viable and have something to offer is something that we need to look at from a national perspective.
Again, playing devil's advocate. In the Westminster system, what does it matter if an independent gets elected?
Well, technically, Bahamians look at politics as the be-all and end-all, the whole enchilada. If an independent gets elected, they have an opportunity then to access the same funding for constituency allowances. They have the opportunity to have carriage over a lot of activities in the constituency. If they wanted to have an election in their constituency, which is what I would propose for Elizabeth, to elect council persons in each district, as opposed to trying to take care of it all on their own, and then you use some of the budget for the issues that relate to each of those particular districts so that it's equal and proportionate as much as possible distribution of those resources, then you could see a model of local government, in a sense, played out in that one area. You get an opportunity now to have a pilot program, as it were, in that one constituency to see how that independent representation on the constituency level and also on the legislative level might have an impact. There's something called members' bills. Independent candidates or opposition members or even members of governing parties can present their own bills for consideration to Parliament. Every member of Parliament is equal in the parliamentary system. So you don't have a situation where the government, when they're in Parliament, should be considered as superior. No, everyone is equal. Everyone has the same one vote. Everyone has the same constituency allowances. Some of them who have government and cabinet responsibilities get paid a salary to do that work, but that doesn't affect how they're perceived in Parliament.
You're talking fairy tales now.
No, this is the facts.
No,
we just
that
haven't
doesn't
had
happen.
people act on these things.
Who would? Who would spend upwards of $250,000 running for a particular constituency, win that seat, and I don't like the terms we use, they win the seat, like that's their reward for anyway. But who does that? Wins the seat, is awarded the $500,000 a year or a term, whatever, however much it is, to their particular constituency, and then, as you just described, doles that out to independent persons in order to better the community.
It's 200,000, 100,000, and then there's it's pretty much 200,000 now, and then you have 30,000 for the office itself.
Right.
If you want to see progress, who do you go to? The people that actually live there, right? If you want to know what the issues are,
Yeah, but I don't spend $250,000 on this. I
You
could
spend
just
it?
go give
Well, we need campaign finance and reform to understand exactly
more fairy tales.
what happened there.
More fairy tales. What are you getting at?
Why
Who's
are
going?
these fairy
Who's
tales?
going to implement that?
Thank you very much. Only independent voices in Parliament.
And
can
again,
start these sorts of
in case you
changes.
didn't, I am playing devil's advocate.
You're doing it so well.
Who's going to do that?
Not the people in there now. Not the people in Parliament now. They will not introduce any sensible, reasonable, effective campaign finance reform.
But they's the only people in there.
Because that's who we vote for, to be in there. They're the people who put themselves up for election. It's a cycle, I know, yeah. But things could change. Like after we had the level of disappointment with the previous administration and by a landslide elected the FNM into power, we now have a government and we're seeing what they're doing. And so in another 4 years, we're going to have an evaluation. You know, generally, people are going to say, oh, well, I don't know if they did what I thought they were supposed to do or what they said they do or what I thought they should have done. Who are we going to vote for? The same people who you overwhelmingly voted out in 2017?
Yes.
Well, that's coonery and buffoonery, like they say in the States.
See?
I would say
You're
another word.
alienating a
I would
huge-
say another word. That's coonery and buffoonery.
I agree, by the way, but I'm just saying, I'm used to
That's
being alienated.
foolishness. If Bahamians want to live in a country that cannot be what we really want it to be, if we're going to live in a country where we realize that in 80 years, the Bahamas is going to be 80% underwater, and we realize that the environmental impact that we have right now is going to affect that. So if we don't start to really prioritize, these sorts of reforms in terms of changing the way that we do business, changing the way we affect the environment, for instance, we're going to have grandchildren and great-grandchildren that inherit a flooded country, and they might end up being the refugees seeking asylum that we like to turn away.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. We don't have to worry about it. But they
could be dead.
our children do, and grandchildren do.
So what?
Okay.
I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but we inherited a debt, you and I, we aren't too far apart in age, we inherited a debt of around $1.5 billion when we were born. Our parents inherited a debt of around 100 million. We inherited a debt of around 1 to 1.5 billion. Our children, if we have any now, will be inheriting a debt of between 7 to 12 billion. There are some wild figures that are being thrown around. An exact number hasn't been, to my satisfaction, being given to the populace of how much the Bahamas is actually in debt. If our parents didn't care enough not to keep borrowing and leave us with a debt, we were born into and we're on the hook for. And if we don't care enough to not leave our own children tens of billions of dollars in debt, why should they care? I mean, because let's talk about the next generation. Let's say the people who turn 18 in 4 years, who will be voting. Why wouldn't they vote for more free stuff for them and just put the debt on their children, which is what you just explained we were doing anyway? Why not?
Well, it's about what we want. At the end of the day, I am not going to force anybody's hand. If Bahamians have a consensus at the end of the day that we are willing to just allow this country and its resources to be squandered away and be ill-managed by the administrations that we've seen previously, I mean, some people have the option of relocating.
Some people have relocated.
Children graduating from university in abroad
And coming back home.
in 2013, I think 61% of them or so did not return to the Bahamas. And I'm going to gamble that that number is going to steadily increase. So if we don't care about not just preservation but progress in this country, then we should just all stop complaining and bitching and moaning and live life, because
Tomorrow we die.
This is all we're gonna get.
You drinking big
And
beer.
keep falling in the same ditch and having to go pay to get your tire fixed. Or keep catching the bus, but wading in the water with no galoshes whenever it rains because the drains ain't clear up or whatever, architectural infrastructure we have ain't conducive to you not having a river to walk through when you go try to catch a bus and it rains for 10 minutes. We keep living like we in an uncivilized country. Keep having the crime, the war, like this marijuana and medical marijuana debate.
Oh, we're covering all the topics today.
Why should it be a debate? Why should it be a debate? How backward are we?
Can I play devil's advocate again?
That don't even fly. Some things is just like plain and simple, black and white. You look online. Everybody has access to information. Nobody can tell me that you cannot look online and see the benefits of medicinal marijuana use in children with epilepsy and all sorts of different diseases and ailments and illnesses. Meanwhile, we got millions and millions of dollars worth of marijuana being discovered in the Bahamas that we either burn or discard of in some way every year. Like, the amount of waste that we have happening here, the lack of innovation, the lack of progress, just the pollution that we have going on in a country that's supposed to be a small island developing state with climate change on its agenda.
Who isn't getting their human rights respected in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas?
Well, legally, for instance, just as an example, I think in 2016 July it was that we passed the Equal Opportunities Bill for persons with disabilities. It took 40 years of work for those advocates and activists in that realm to actually get to this place where these bills were put into law.
Yay!
Yay!
We did it!
Woohoo!
Everyone's equal. Why are we still arguing about human rights, Terneille?
No, those laws are on the book, but the implementation given was until the end of 2017.
You asked for too much.
I asked for what is promised
Okay.
and what is mandated. So as of this point, it is now 2018. We have yet to see the implementation level that they promised in those equal opportunity bills for persons with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why. Like, what's inhibiting us from following through? You know, if you need to get certain buildings up to code, start with the government buildings, for one. Knock that out of the way. Government, you be an example. You show private, corporate citizens, hey, we've done it. You don't think that would be an incentive for them and say, we're going to stick by our deadlines and here are the penalties and we're going to actually have officers go around and enforce. And this is just one component of the bill related to equal rights for persons with disabilities. Simple accessibility to public buildings. Imagine the rest of the bills, of the components of this law that they have to look at implementing. They can't even get properly past this first basic fundamental stage.
Terneille,
I'm just telling
it's
you.
on the books.
But is
What more do you
it in
want?
practice? And the point of being on the books is to be put into practice. If it's not in practice, if it's not implemented and functioning properly, we have a problem. Governance is not about simply making laws for the sake of making laws. Governance is about implementing and enacting laws that affect our lives positively. That's not happening in the Bahamas. They pick, choose, and refuse which laws they want to pass and table and implement. When it comes to freedom of information, when it comes to Marco's Law, when it comes to persons with disabilities equal rights bills, they have issues with it because it's not a priority to them or their special interest.
I got goosebumps. Since you brought it up, let's talk about it. Why should I care about Marco's Law? What is Marco's Law? Why should I care about it? Why do we need one more law on the books?
Well, Marco's Law was proposed by the late Dr. Bernard Nottage in 2011 in response to the heinous death of Marco Archer, who was murdered, and he was 11 years old. Prior to that, we had had a number of children that were murdered or abused to death or subjects of abuse and this thing or the other. But this Marco's Law was specific to establishing an Amber Alert type system like they have in the United States that does away with the typical wait periods that you would have for a missing person for the police to be involved, and would pretty much put boots on the ground right away. It would also ensure that the media has an image and information about the missing child so that they can put out alerts on a frequency that is accessible to the general public. And this law was actually passed in 2013. This component of Marco's law, the Marco's alert, was passed in 2013. But we haven't seen a single Marco's alert, and scores of children have gone missing or been missing since then that were later found.
That sounds perfectly reasonable to have that type of system in place.
Absolutely.
Why isn't it in place? And I don't want you to answer. I need you to play devil's advocate now.
Oh,
You've been elected.
I'm the
You're in the
government.
cabinet. You are the government. Why don't we have Marco's law already? Why isn't that implemented on a wide scale across the country?
am I the Minister of Social Services
You are
or
whichever
National
minister
Security?
that you need to be to answer this question most
Social
effectively.
Services and National Security. I'm a combination.
Madam
of both.
Minister, your portfolio includes social services and national security. One would argue that the rules, the guidelines that would have been implemented by Marco's law fall into both categories, both ministries. You are ultimately where the buck stops for each. Why don't we see, even though we've seen many children go missing since it was implemented, or supposed to have been implemented, why don't we have that in place now? Madam Minister.
Well, the camera's rolling. Oh, yeah. I mean, we mentioned it in the speech from the throne, so we probably could get around to it. We just start our administration, you know,
Give you
like,
some
give us some
time?
time.
How much time you need? Because you only got 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it in the speech from the throne, so
Mhm.
I'm sure the Prime Minister is going to put that on the agenda.
But you are the minister of both these ministries. You have both of these come under your portfolio. Do we have to wait for the Prime Minister to do something to get that implemented? And if so, then why do we need you?
I'm sorry, I can't take it. I can't take it. It's too much.
Okay, be Terneille again.
Oh, thank you. It's easier though. That was a good example of the fact that it's easier to critique and suggest things than be in
Just
power.
parenthetically, you think either one of those ministers would be willing to sit down with it?
You're gonna find out.
I mean, you probably know them. You got goosebumps now, oh no. You probably are more within that world than I would be able
I
to
challenge
get
you
in.
to pose the question to them.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that would really be the only way we can know the real answers. I'm just
Because I don't see any
speculating.
other journalists doing this type of in-depth.
Yeah. Well, you know, I have to give it to
Oh
some
yes,
journalists. They've
and
been
I
consistent
want to
over the
call
years.
some names as well because I am big fans of Candida. Big.
You did it.
I am a big fan of Candida Dames. Ever since we first worked together at JCN, I've always been and I've always supported her as well as several others. I will say this, over the past decade, my list of journalists that I am proud of has gotten shorter.
Okay.
When the camera stops rolling, I'll give you a list of the names of the persons I no longer support and why.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well, I think there are a few that are kind of sleepers that have consistently reached out and said, "Oh, what's happening? Have you gotten any traction with the Marco's Alert or the gender-based violence prevention laws or anything like that?" So they would actually seek us out and say, "Hey, let's do a highlight." But it always ends up on the second half of the broadcast, and less people tune into
buried,
that.
that's
long.
the term you're looking for.
But I guess this is a good segue into something that you asked earlier. How do we actually affect the types of change? One thing I mentioned earlier was let's have more capable people who run as independents and promote this as a valid option. The
Well,
next
people don't vote for them, so give me the next one.
the next is really fostering within the media a priority on these issues that sometimes we consider light news. Getting more people who are going to follow up and ensure that there's accountability from the government level, and we don't just have the stories that are salacious or sensational, but we actually have the stories that are going to affect vulnerable populations if, you know, laws and procedures and processes are put in place. So regarding anti-corruption, we have the Organization of American States. We signed an anti-corruption treaty with them in the 90s, and they actually
You just had to get us back to politics again. Okay.
well, they actually
But-
came and
but
did an
since you brought us
investigation
there, right.
in 2000 and I forget when it is now, but they came and did an investigation. I emailed and said, hey, we have issues with politicians not disclosing, they're breaking the law, blah, blah, blah. And they never responded, but they showed up in September of that year that they sent that email. and did an investigation of the Attorney General's office and different departments to see if they were complying with the anti-corruption type laws that we have in existence. We have a Public Accounts Committee. We have the Public Disclosure Act. We have a number of things that would be considered a complement of anti-corruption laws in the Bahamas, but are they
Collecting
being
dust.
enforced? Apparently they collect in mold at the Public Disclosure Commission office, and that's their excuse for not getting some of the work done or some of the information out. If we continue to accept these things, then mold on us as a country. That's what we could expect.
You're funnier than you purport to be. Our Prime Minister said that something as simple as taking pens and stuff home is considered corruption.
Yeah.
That seems like a person who is really all for the rule of law, doing things above board and in the right way.
But then he also said we had a $200 million annual bill for corruption.
Did he?
I saw that somewhere. I didn't see any qualifying figures to explain where that amount came from.
It's a very specific amount, too.
Yeah.
One would think that an amount that specific and that large would have a lot of documentation behind it
To accompany it, right?
that can be shown
Yes. That would be nice.
to support the claim.
Yes. Then we could understand why it's happening, where it's coming from, and how to root it out, right? Or
One would think.
okay. But I feel like when Bahamian government officials go abroad, they become like supermen and superwomen. Ass upon their chest, they beat up their chest and be like, yeah, this is the way it is. This is what we're doing in our country, or this is what we plan to do.
Mm-hmm.
And bomb, bomb, bomb. They say whatever needs to be said to sound super great.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come home and we ask them, so where the thing is you promised us? Where the thing is? Please, master, please, give us the thing you promised us. And they're like, who you is again? Or you ain't no international delegation who could give me some chairmanship or title? Forget you.
Simple responses
Address
to
the
complex
backlog.
issues. Okay. I'm going to give you 15 seconds. Illegal immigration.
Address the backlog. Look at amending the laws that we said we're going to amend regarding children's rights at birth to Bahamian citizens. And finally, in the interim, short term, let's look at a designation for asylum seekers and refugees, because I don't think we officially have a refugee or asylum status in the Bahamas. In Canada,
15 seconds.
yes, fine.
The gender wage gap.
Oh boy. The gender wage gap, as far as I know, in the Bahamas is not as big an issue as it might be elsewhere. I know that there are 80% of enrolled students at the University of the Bahamas are women. I think that should be looked at and addressed, because I think we need more young men.
I'm going to give you
Educated.
extra time because I'm liking where this is going.
Yeah, I think we need more equality when it comes to not just employment and wages, but education and the culture around. Sometimes it seems people send their boys to go and do labor jobs or that sort of stuff, and then they send their girls to go to university. Or one instance I heard of, a family sent their son to public school, sent the daughter to private school,
God.
just on the basis of she needs an education to get ahead, but you could go be a construction worker or something. I don't know. Anyway, we need to address
Someone's going to
gender
take
issue.
take your woman card because you weren't speaking the party line just now.
What body?
VAT.
What?
Simple answer.
Show us the money
Okay.
from the previous administration.
I'll go with that.
Take some of it out of the consolidated fund and tell us how it is going to be used, how it was originally intended and pitched to us to be used in the PLP administration. So backtrack with the what.
Segue into an associative question. How much debt is too much for the country?
I don't know. I'm not an economist. All I know is we need to figure out more ways to sustain our marine resources, our agricultural resources, and be able to feed ourselves more, because right now about 90 to 95% of the food that we eat is imported. So I'm not going to worry about debt or the economy right now. I'm going to worry about survival and sustainability, because I don't think we're there yet. If some airway was to close off, or we weren't able to have access, we wouldn't have no clothes and food, and we'd be up a creek. So,
You know, if the Chinese trawlers were fishing in the water, there'd be lots of fish we could get.
oh, okay. Well, good thing we have a good relationship with Chinese. Hey! Are you Chinese?
I'm not. Income tax. The implementation of income tax.
Let's get it on.
You're in favor of that. You don't have a
Yeah.
problem with that.
You
Okay.
making 50 grand or more?
Oh, you're talking about graduated income
Yes.
tax. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
You are a liberal, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. Y'all love taking people money.
Well,
Ah.
see, right now,
Mm-hmm.
NIB,
Yes.
well, I guess they have their little tears, so I can't say that. I take it back. I don't think that poor people should be subject. I mean, they need a break, a chance, an opportunity. And I think things like that would help with equality. Do you realize the level of economic inequality we have in the Bahamas?
Not to the degree that others might be aware of, but I'm certainly not blind.
Like, you have maybe about like 43,000, they said in 2013, living under the extreme poverty line.
Terrible.
Do you know what the extreme poverty line is?
Less than, wait, if you're talking globally or for the
In the
Bahamas?
Bahamas,
No, I'm not aware what it would be for the
like
Bahamas.
$4,500 a year, each person is subsisting off, or
Okay.
less. That ain't extreme poverty. That's like how you alive, like what you doing, like you living here. And then you have billionaires, winter residents, permanent residents, whatever.
This
You
is
have-
going to get tricky.
Like
Two
in the
questions.
same country, in this little country.
Two questions.
Mm.
What does one have to do with the other? Follow up.
Mm-hmm.
How do we fix it for the one if it truly is that much of a problem?
Well, I mean, how did we get billionaires here in the first place? We opened up, our borders and said
Mhm.
you buy a house worth a certain amount,
Yes.
you automatically get access to apply for permanent residency.
Mhm.
Cool. Plenty incentives for foreigners.
Yes.
Do we have, not similar because this is a whole different kind of fish, but do we have reasonable incentives for local people and entrepreneurial opportunities and things like that? I would say that we don't.
I would also say that that would be impossible to ever regulate to a point where everyone is happy or even most people are happy. And follow up,
Let's start somewhere.
I would start by removing the power of the government to do that in the first place.
And who would be able to do that? Just private.
No one.
So there are no incentives to anybody.
Exactly.
So no more Bahamas, no more Atlantis.
No, there will always be a Bahama because there will always be someone with enough money willing to build something on the scale of an Atlantis or a Bahama. That's always going to be the case. There will always be rich people wanting to find places that are friendly to invest their money in. When we use incentives as a way to attract, we will always tailor our incentives to the people we want to attract, which means the government will be controlling who succeeds and who fails. I don't think any government should have that power.
Okay.
So my solution, if we want to call it that, would be to move away from the direction we've been going. We've been doing this for 50, 60, 70 odd years. And it's always been my friends now benefit. 15 years later, someone else's friends are benefiting. Usually to the detriment of the average Bahamian, always to the benefit of whoever happens to be wielding the power at the time. I say, let's take that power away from them, which segues us into the next question. Big government or small government?
I believe we need local government. But
So small government,
we need a multi-tiered government. Like when I spoke with,
indeed. But
We-
as
we
soon
only
as
have
you
a-
start chopping up the power bases, you get small government.
Okay.
Whether that includes one person or 1 million people, because no one controls enough of power to make anyone else's life a torment. That's small government.
but again, with all of these things and systems that are currently in place, the system of government, the type of government, I feel like we can progressively work towards it in incremental stages as opposed to wholesale. Boom! You're a republic now, let's do it. Boom! You small government now, let's do it. Like, let's test the waters a bit. Because Bahamians are not, while I might be liberal, I'm not an extremist.
What's an extremist?
An
As far as
extremist might just be like,
liberalism
boom! Take it! Just take it, and if you don't like it, too bad. This is what we doing. Let's have an opportunity to test some things out, do some litmus, and then see how it goes and go from there.
Let's
Build.
wean ourselves off the government teat.
Yes, let's wean ourselves. Let's take the time that we need and get the knowledge and whatever resiliency we need to really be steadfast in this. And then when we give it a go, we have
Steadfast
laid the
and
foundation.
independent. Let me add something to that.
Go ahead.
Independent.
Steadfast
The
and
resiliency
independent.
to be steadfast and independent.
Right. And we hype up this whole independence so much from the colonial rule that we had, but we still, for some reason or the other, scoff at independent options. I think that's going to make a turnaround soon because we can't keep carrying on this way unless we liking it and loving it. I don't want it to get to the point where Bahamians are desperate. Because when Bahamians are desperate, some of us don't know how to carry on, and it could get dangerous.
It will.
It already has had some foreshadowing.
We can see it in the world around us today.
I want to see a peaceful revolution in this country. And that's going to be very difficult, and it's going to take more time than an alternative form of revolution. But I want to see it happen, and I want to see Bahamians participate. Don't just sit back and wait for some hero or some savior to come and lead you to the promised land. Because we in the promised land, and we squandering it now. So we have to save ourselves. And everybody working together has to do their part. If you're good at this, that, or the other, show somebody else. Mentor somebody else. Pass it on. Don't keep it for yourself. I mean, just simple concept like this, I think could help us to have a better cultural identity in the Bahamas. All we want to do is complain. What else, though? We should have the best activists in this country. The amount of complaining and the level of complaining we do and talking about people, we should have the best commentators and activists and investigative journalists, all of that.
Well, we do have Rodney Monker. And on that lovely note, we shall bring this conversation to an end. Terneille Burrows, I want to thank you so
I'm
much
thinking of a finger for him.
for sitting with me. Come on, everyone knows Rodney. Thank you
And
so
it's
much.
not this.
Thank you so much for sitting with me, for engaging in this lively discussion. I don't think it devolved into a debate.
No. You had your say.
Yeah. We don't agree on everything, but there are certain things that everyone with sensible thinking can agree on. I think we did that today. And I want to issue not a challenge, but an invitation to anyone else who, especially those who disagree with me. Let's sit down, let's talk. Let's not argue. Let's talk about how we can together make our country greater.
And put the call out now for Minister Lanisha Roll and Minister Marvin Dames to come on your show.
Oh my goodness. Oh, if only. Ministers, I kind of know you. Kind of. So let's make something happen. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm doing good. You look really nice.
Thank you very much.
Who did your artwork?
Natalia.
Natalia. I gotta find Natalia, man. You look really nice. Trust me. If I could about that, no? All tempo. Trust me, I can't wait to be there. And any last words?
Well, listen, I just want to tell the people of the Bahamas, the 242, oh yeah, that Mr. Temple love you, understand? I love you, and the rest of the Caribbean believes in you because you're a big part of the Caribbean. So as we celebrate Temple Turns 3, we want all of y'all to come out. It is about you, the 242, you understand?